going on, everybody? It's Land Ray Only Been Debate. It's another episode of 27th Letter Podcast. Very excited about this one. About a few months ago, I met this lady, maybe a month and a half. She was speaking, she was part of a panel, she was speaking, talking about justice and the reform system and so on and so forth. And I thought it would be dope to sit down with her. And her name is Jordana Goldlist, and she's a criminal defense lawyer in the city of Toronto. And you guys know I don't play the lawyer game. You guys know. But I made an exception for her because I feel like, first, as a woman and what she stands for, I felt like I need to shed more spotlight on it because it's kind of, piggyback on some of the things I've been speaking on. And she's going to touch more on it. We don't agree on everything, but, some of the stuff I agree with, So, Jordana, tell them who you are.
Thank you for having me. I think we've already agreed to disagree on some things, and that's okay. That's how we as a society grow, is through debate and through change. And if everybody thought the same way, we'd never be able to advance. So I'm happy to be on the show and talk about some of the things that interest you. We do have some common ground for sure. in our distrust of the justice system as a system, and I certainly think that as a starting ground. We've been on opposite ends of the system at some points, same in some ways, and we both share views that it really is designed to keep people stuck inside, and I think we're both trying to help people see that so they don't get stuck.
For sure. So before going, how was your week anyways?
My week was good. Yeah.
Did you have any case
busy at work? Yeah, I just got a new very sad case, another homicide case where young teenagers killing young teenagers. So we're seeing more and more of that lately, but hoping to help them through the system.
Louis Marge, Zero Gun Violence, he said it the best. This epidemic, violence that's going on, it's really supposed to happen because of negligence of our forefathers, grandparents and so on. So these things are going to happen. So but hopefully, you're here to kind of help these situations, find out the truth, because not everything is, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's not just the way it's presented all the time. It's always a backstory.
Yeah.
There's a story before the story. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, yeah.
And how was your week?
Well, I can't complain. Same thing. Children, family, life, cooking for my 5 principles cuisines. And and then just trying to get ready for this interview, which was cool. I got to listen to your past podcast. So, but yeah, I haven't been working out. I've been loafing on the working out thing. So I need to get back on that. I need to get back in the gym. I know you do your gym thing.
Oh yeah, at least 4 to 5 days a week. Yeah. I have to be in the gym.
I used to do three Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So, but got really busy, kind of neglected it, but it's so ingrained in me that I can't go too long without. So
no, that's like my favorite form of therapy. That's where I go to release the stress. That's the hour that I take for myself, where I'm not actually like on my phone. I'm not responding to people. Phone stays in my bag and it doesn't come out on the floor with me when I'm working out, because I need that space. But it's where I regenerate, right?
It's what decompress.
That's it. And it's like I leave it all out in the gym, and then I can give more in return.
And you need to balance. that.
Sure.
I remember I went to a lecture once where there's a doctor, she's a natural healer, and she says she works with cancer patients, and she goes home, she literally has to take a shower just to wash off their issue,
right,
that she doesn't want to carry with her.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there who might not know this. Whatever profession you're in, you have to learn to separate you are in your life and not carry it with you, because, no pun intended, you become a cancer in your own life.
Yeah.
Just taking on people's stuff, And for you, dealing with all this traumatic incident, families and so on and so forth, I don't know how you don't carry it home, because just watching news, I don't watch news for those reasons, because it's like, I don't need to hear it. I know what's going on. already been through it. So it weighs on my mind, anyways, seeing what's going on. So I can imagine how it is for you, just being on the forefront of it. It's another case.
For sure, but you have to be able to separate a little bit in order to give more of yourself, right? So if I personalized all my cases or let it, sort of fester emotionally, it would prevent me from doing the job that I need to do for my clients. So I think that you have to find ways to have that release. The gym's certainly one of them. The shooting range is another. I've talked about that as well. And so those are the two things I do to really get out of my head for a minute, step away from that space, and then come back into it even harder.
Yeah, if you don't know, check out her Instagram. You see her with a gun. She don't play. You know what I mean? She likes her gun, so and that's another thing for me, for the women out here. This is what I feel. This is one of the things I feel. This is why even with Louis Marsh, when he's talking about getting rid of guns, zero guns, guns are not the problem. It's the people.
And actually, Louis Marsh is pretty solid. He's not against sport shooters and hunters. When I hear him speak, it's not about a complete handgun ban. It's how do we help get illegal guns off the street and out of the hands of people who aren't dealing with them safely, who aren't law abiding with those guns, because I don't think he's all completely against handguns in general. He wants to give the youth, especially, and young people, the support they need so they don't feel like they need to be picking up a gun illegally in order to protect themselves and their families.
Even if they did have a gun license,
right,
it still doesn't change nothing. We still got to deal with whatever.
That's what I'm saying. It's the underlying issues.
It's
100%.
not the fact that it's illegal guns. It's why are you thinking to go pick up a gun when you could talk to a man or talk to somebody or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know what it is because I've been in those shoes, so I know what it is. So, but yeah, let's get into it. Let's start. First question I want to know: who's your mother?
Who's my mother?
Yeah, who's your mother?
My mom's.
Where were you born? Toronto.
So I was born in Toronto. My mom is one of three children born to immigrants. They came here after World War II. Okay. My grandfather was in a concentration camp for 6 years, from the time that he was 12 to 18, then spent a year in a hospital before making his way over to Canada. My grandmother escaped the war through the French resistance and was brought over here from Paris to Toronto. So my mom's born, that was the first generation born here. I'm second. Okay. So she raised me in Toronto, north of Toronto. Okay. All she wanted was to be a mom. That was her goal in life, was to be a mother. I am her only child. She had cancer when I was really young. She had ovarian cancer and wasn't able to have any more children. So I was the focus of her life for a really long time. Yeah. So it took a while for me to make her proud, as I'm sure you've read in some of the articles that have been about me. I struggled a lot as a teenager, but I've pulled through now. So she's super proud. And even when I was going through my struggles, she was always there to try to help me. She just didn't necessarily have the tools.
Did you have your dad there?
No, my dad left when I was 2. My parents divorced when I was 5. He was out of my life by the time I was 6 or 7. But I was raised by my stepfather, who sort of did the best he could as well to be a father. But it's hard to be a stepfather. I think that when a child's left by their biological dad, trying to fill that role gets hard. So.
What do you think that was part of the source of your struggle?
I think so. I internalized a lot. I was the sort of weapon of choice between my mom and my dad in their marriage. And so I think that neither one of them knew how to deal with that. And so from the time I was young, for example, my dad won the right to have me every other weekend for the weekend, and he would pick me up, but he didn't really want me and didn't know what to do with me, so he dropped me off at his sister's house. So I grew up with my little cousins.
As a child, you know when you're wanted and when you're not.
For sure. And so he didn't really know what to do with me. So I spent the weekend with my cousins, and then he picked me up at the end of the weekend and bring me back to my mom, who wanted me the whole time, but he didn't want my mom to have me, so he would pick me up. And then eventually my mom managed to get those weekends revoked. And I don't know whether it's true or not. According to my mom, he kept trying to kidnap me from school, so she would switch me from school to school, so it wasn't really like stable.
Did you
According
feel
to my dad, I have no idea. According to my dad, he
How
said
old
he
are you?
just wanted to see me. I was a kid. I was like 6, 7, 8 years old. So I'm switching to public schools all the time with my mom telling me that it's because my dad's
So
trying to
it got
kidnap
ugly.
me.
It got ugly.
It got really ugly, and then eventually years later, my dad's like, "No, I just wanted to see you, that you were like healthy and you were okay." So I would sit outside the school, just trying to like physically
You know
see
what's
you.
funny?
So I don't know where the truth is. Somewhere between those two stories, right?
I seen a meme somewhere where it says, somewhere there's a woman that's trying to prove a point, but trying to keep their child away from their father.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to believe it, but sometimes it's true.
Sometimes it is, and like I said, I don't know where the truth in that was, but I was like the weapon back and forth between them, and so I didn't have, as an only child, I didn't really have anyone to go to, talk to, and so everything got internalized.
You got no ally.
Nothing. So everything got internalized. I
So
didn't talk
that's
to
why I relate
anybody.
to you a lot, because I was the only child for the longest time.
Right.
My siblings, I have two siblings, but the youngest, second child, my brother, came when I was 11. So
Okay.
for many years, it was just me.
Right.
So I learned to deal with stuff on my own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why I understood where you're coming from, and you know where I see where your growth came from. You know what I mean? So, but yeah. So 14. So what happened? Eventually, what transpired?
So, I mean, I started acting up, understandably, when I was like 10 and 11. By the time I was 12, I started drinking, I started using drugs. I just didn't really know how to cope with anything. But I was always really good in school. I had good friends. So, like, nobody really knew how to deal with that, right? I wasn't getting suspended. I was always, like, at school, but I couldn't focus. I was just in my own place, and I couldn't really relate to anyone around me. And that sort of just exploded at like 12 to 14. I started using drugs, started acting out. And by this point, like, my mom just didn't know how to help me. It was like I was out of control, emotionally. And that's because I really didn't know how to deal with them, right? I had like all of this stuff going on for the first 10 years of my life that I didn't really speak to anyone about. And so, yeah, the day after I turned 14, she dropped me off at a group home called Youthdale. And I spent a year and a half there learning to play a different system. You know, it's funny, we talk a lot about the justice system, but the child welfare system is just another system.
I'm going to talk to you about that, by the way, because before you go on, while I was incarcerated, I did my own research, because I was in care too at one point. When I was, the amount of guys who were once in care, before they started getting into any type of crime, they were just once in care, end up in pen. There's a lot of people who were once just, for me, I was being abused by my dad. I was being beaten. That's how I got the group home.
Right.
But it was like, as soon as I got to that system, it seemed like there's a whole, okay, because one thing I realized with the system is that they feed off of broken homes.
Yeah.
So early on, when it sensed, oh, you can't take care of your child? Okay, so that means down the line, we're going to take care of it. You see what I mean?
Absolutely. And that's really, like, for a lot of people, the start of their institutionalization, right? Because you're told when to get up and what to do, and if you don't make your bed properly, you're penalized, but if you do, then you get, a chocolate bar, and it's like, okay, so this is sort of how the system works, and you learn, like, what rules and what stages you need to go through in order to earn your freedom. And by freedom, it could be something so stupid as, like, making a phone call to your friends. And at 15 years old, when you can't make a phone call to your friends or go out to the movies and do, like, normal things.
I remember when I was in a group home, I had to sneak because of my dad.
Right.
I couldn't see my mom.
Right.
So I had to sneak to go meet my mom.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Like, for the first 10 years of my life, it was always been my mom. Came to this part of the world, within a year and a half, I'm in a group home. So, like, think about that.
Right.
I went from knowing my mom and then can't be around and I was like 12.
Well, yeah, in Youthdale, the first 30 days, you're not allowed any contact whatsoever with your friends or family. So now you're ripped from your home, you're ripped from your family, your friends.
And it's not, you didn't do anything wrong.
No, I mean, like, sure, I was misbehaving, for sure, but, like, to be segregated from the people that you still know love you, right? It wasn't a question of like I wasn't being neglected, I wasn't being abused at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you know, my parents were trying to get me help because they knew that there was like underlying emotional issues that they weren't equipped to deal with. And so, and then of course, there's always a psychiatrist on site willing to dole up medication. And that's probably a whole other conversation. But I certainly saw, like, around me a lot of the kids fall victim to the psychiatrist medication that they were being put on. I was not interested.
So, 14, so you're on your own till when?
So I was in a group home from 14 to 15. Yeah, I was there for a year and a half. So I went from public school in Richmond Hill, okay, like working class, multicultural Richmond Hill, to starting grade 9 at Eastville Collegiate at Broadview and Gerrard.
I know what that is.
So very much urban culture that I knew nothing about.
Right beside the Don Jail.
Right beside the Don Jail. And thank God I fell in with the right group of friends who taught me everything I needed to know. Because it's a whole different way of life, right? I didn't understand what it was like growing up in Regent Park. I didn't know anything about it, for sure. And I needed to be educated on it. Thank God I liked hip hop and I liked playing basketball. and I had literally
some icebreakers.
I did. I had some icebreakers, and I had people who were just, I guess, curious about me, and they started talking to me, and they started took me into their wing.
Personality helped too.
I hope so, because I saw some girls getting bullied, I saw some girls get picked on, and all I could think is, like, I could easily have been that, right? Here I was, like, suburban Richmond Hill girl in the group home that's thrown into, like, the general population at Eastville Collegiate that I knew nothing about. But I got an education and made great friends and, like, really solid people around me, thank God. And, but, you know, so that was grade 9, and then half of grade 10, and then it was time for me to leave again. So now it's time for me to go back to Richmond Hill, where I can't fit in with anybody there either. Because now they're complaining about shit, like their parents won't give them money to go to the movies. And I just saw like what real poverty looked like and what real struggle looked like for young people coming up, you know, in a situation, in a place like Regent Park. And I was like, you don't even know struggle. How can you complain at all? And so I just saw this real distinction.
You could say the instability, the not being stable as a child, got you the advantage to experience different things.
Absolutely.
And that's what helped you shape your path.
Absolutely. You know, as much as there are parts of my life that I wouldn't want to repeat or wish on anyone, I have no regrets. Like, it's shaped my worldview as it is today, and I appreciate that.
If I have to go through what I have to go through to learn it, so be it. Let it be me, though.
Right.
I don't want nobody else to go through it.
Same.
Let it be me. You know what I mean? So
same. So then I went back home, and I wasn't really fitting in at school. Other than I used to smoke a lot of weed when I was in high school, so
it's legal now. It's 420.
Yeah, for sure. That's true. It's 420 today.
Is it 420 yet?
So I smoked a lot. Yeah, I smoked a lot of weed in high school, and so that was one thing that kids from Richmond Hill and Regent Park have in common. There's always going to be that group. So that's how I sort of made friends. Now, when I was back in high school in Richmond Hill, but you know, the underlying problems that I had gone in for and the disruption in my family home, that never got fixed. And so me and my mom started fighting, and more, because now, you know, it's like when you come out of care, you've got all this freedom and you don't really know how to function. And, you know, I was angry at my parents for putting me there. You know, I can say today I know they did it from a place of love and concern, but as, you know, a 14, 15-year-old kid, that's not how I felt. And so I didn't want to listen to the rules, and I just wanted to go and get high. And that really was what spiraled me out of control, so that by the time I was 17, I had left home, I dropped out of high school, I'd been arrested twice, and I was on the street until I was 19. And that for me really obviously shaped my worldview, because then life just became about basic survival.
So what was it that said, you know what day, what incident where you're like, you know what? Okay.
It wasn't necessarily one. It was a few. Just before my 19th birthday, I had a near fatal drug overdose.
Wow.
And so I set
some rules for myself. Drugs?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I set up certain rules for myself to prevent myself from overdosing again. And I, within 2 months, was back doing the exact same things in the exact same places. And I was like, wow, I really have no control. And I just had this moment of clarity. I looked in the mirror and I was, at this point it was just after my 19th birthday. I was just under 100 pounds. I was gray. I was a junkie, and I looked it and I could see it. And I just realized that I could probably spend another 5-10 years like this. It wasn't, crucial that I get myself some help, but I just didn't want to. I was like, I would rather die today or get help than have to live like this. Mm. And I called a friend who had wanted to get me into a long-term rehabilitation center. I had pushed it off for a long time, and I said, I'm ready. Let's do this. So,
and I think that's why when we talk about rehabilitation or the system, it's not to rehabilitate, because if we really want to help people, there has to be a way for us to get them to a point where they realize they need help.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like locking somebody up is not going to be like, you're not going to teach them that you need help.
No, you gotta want it, but then you have to have, you have to have the ability to get help. You can't do it on your own. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem with jail. We're just logging people up. And even if while they're in jail they realize, you know what, I really want help. Okay, so how are we going to help with that transition? And that's a piece that I talk about a lot, is there really is no proper reintegration that will allow people to succeed.
I told you about my challenges.
Absolutely,
It's crazy.
And it's basic stuff. Get someone their ID before they come out, so that when you come out, you have your ID and your social insurance number. If you know the person's a drug addict, let's get them connected into a rehab so they can learn how to live again. Because it's not enough to just stop using drugs. You have to figure out other coping skills.
In a courtroom, there's 16 people that's getting paid in a courtroom.
Absolutely.
16. So it's by design. Yeah. It's by design, and you, like for me, when I was incarcerated, I didn't think about coming out and be like, I'm gonna change my life when I come out. I started in there because I hear a lot of people talk about it, talk about changing. But you still see their actions in jail, you know what I mean? I don't know. But within, like, you could tell, like, from I got there and I woke up and I was like, you know what? It started from there, and it's what I wanted. It's what I wanted, And I think a lot of it manifested for me because of what I wanted.
Right.
Like I told you, like crazy obstacles thrown in my way that it's supposed to get me back in. But I'm stubborn. I'm very stubborn. Like, put a gun to my head, like, nah, I don't care, do it. It's what I believe in, it's what I believe in.
You have to be. And you're lucky to have that sort of fortitude. And I think that we need to do more to help people see that in themselves. A lot of people don't believe in themselves enough to come up. And, they think it's luck or they think it's some sort of privilege. It's not. It's really just persistence. That's all it is.
And like, for me, it's confidence. It's come down to confidence and believing in yourself. Just being confident. And that's why, like we talk about, most adults, when you look at the problems that they face, it stems from the childhood, the type of childhood that they have. You know what I mean? So, being a parent now, those things are important to me. How it shaped them and what the experience is as a child. Because I know the effects it's going to have in the long run.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So you got help.
So I got help, and everything was like slow and steady. I had a friend of mine always said to me, "Slow and steady wins the race," and it really is true. Nothing was stubborn. I came out of rehab. I had to go and finish a bunch of high school credits because I had like pieces of high school credits. Back then you had to do the Ontario academic credits in order to get into university. I just knew I needed education. It took me until I was 21 to actually graduate from high school, and then I went directly to university. I didn't really have a goal. I knew I had wanted to be a lawyer from the time I was a little kid. I watched a family member go through the system.
Okay,
and
so
I was I want that title. I want to be a lawyer because that's important. That's something that people respect. But then when I was on the street, I met all kinds of people with titles that are supposed to garner respect, and God knows they weren't acting respectfully.
This is the thing I find interesting about your journey, especially being homeless and being a woman. You seen what the men and what they're capable of. You understand?
Absolutely. So
you've seen the worst. So you know what I mean? Maybe you've seen the worst, but you've seen being in that position. I remember working, one of the jobs I had growing up, I was a kitchen coordinator for the Red Cross. It was like a winter program. So they had me working at the Red Cross down by Jarvis there. And there was a lot of teenage runaways.
Yeah.
Like people were just like, I'm leaving my house. Like I can't deal with that shit. And I was like, holy. Because I never knew there was so many teenage runaways.
Yeah, and there's little pockets of downtown Toronto where they all congregate and everyone knows, where you can go to do whatever you need to survive. And there's always a spot that you can go to,
so
and there's always people there.
You woke up,
yeah.
You got help,
yeah.
And then said, I'm going to finish, get my credits.
I want to do something, and I knew I needed to make money.
How was your relationship with your mom at that point?
No, it was good. My mom always said that when I'm ready to sober up and go home and go to school and live properly, I had a place to go with her. And when I finally said I was ready, she agreed to take me in, and we worked out an arrangement where I would pay rent and contribute to the home and help her and my stepdad out. That's it, and be responsible, but also to help them, because now they were going to move to a place that was big enough for me to be at. Okay. They had moved after I left home. Mm-hmm. They moved to a different spot, and they're both working class. That my stepdad was doing.
What about your dad? How was your relationship with your dad at that point?
No, I wasn't in my life. When my mom kicked me out once when I was 16 years old and I had nothing, nowhere to go. I'd exhausted, my friends' couches by that point. Their parents were sick of waking up and seeing me, crashed at their place. And I called him and I said, and at this point we hadn't talked since I was in the group home. So we tried to repair things when I was in the group home. He walked out on me. And then when I was 16, I called him and I said, I've got nowhere to stay. Can I come with you? And I'll never forget, he said, this might be the first decision your mom has ever made that I agree with. And he hung up the phone. So no, that is definitely not in the picture.
Up till now? Still
not in the picture. So we tried again. I found out when I was in my early 20s that I had siblings. So I have a half brother and a half sister that I'm 20 years older than. Mm-hmm. And I tried to reconnect with him for their sake. It lasted a few years, and again, it was huge disappointment, and I just shut the door on it. And now I stay away because I don't need that. I don't need to set myself up to be disappointed.
I feel like with my father, I don't really deal with him at all, and I just see him as a sperm donor, so I don't expect nothing.
Right.
So
and then you can't get hurt.
Exactly. So I don't expect nothing.
Right.
I'm good.
Yeah, that's it. I'm at a point in my life where I don't wish him harm. I hope that he is content in the decisions he makes. I really don't. I used to for a long time wish harm. I was so angry at the way that he treated me. I let all of that go. There's no resentment anymore. It's just, I don't need him. I've got a wonderful stepfather who really did everything he could, including supporting my mom. Because when I was on the street, my mom was beside herself. Yeah,
important. She needed that.
Absolutely, and so he stayed solid with her, and still, they're still together through it all. And I don't need that. I don't have any. I don't have any lacking.
Salute to the man that holds down his woman when she's going
100%.
through it. You know what I mean? Straight up.
Through anything.
You know what I mean? But just, it's crazy. It's just so easy for men and women to just separate nowadays, and it's been going on for generations now. It's ridiculous, and now we're paying for it.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We're paying for it.
The amount of offenders in the system that don't have a father figure, that haven't been raised by their dad. It's unbelievable, and need to step up and take responsibility for the kids they're having.
One guy came up to me. I remember it's a tall guy, big guy in the pen, and we got to talking. And he started talking about his mom and got deep. And the man basically was like, "Yo, I don't know who my father is. Yeah. My mom can't tell me who my father is." So I was like, "Oh shit! There's a next level of not knowing who your father is."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's crazy. It's one thing okay, your dad gave up on you, but then it's I don't know.
Right.
Nobody could tell me.
No idea. Yeah.
I was like,
and what message does that send to someone growing up to know that?
You want to see how the guy is so insecure.
Right.
Especially when it comes to women. It's insecure. So when you hear that, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see where that comes from. You know what I mean? It's crazy. But, so you went to... when did you start thinking about going to law school?
So I had wanted to be a lawyer when I was a kid, and then obviously my teenage years made me think there's absolutely no way that I can do that.
Because of what you've been up to?
Yeah, there's no way I can make that transition. So I went to university just because I knew I needed an education somewhere. I fell in love with philosophy. I fell in love with studying philosophy. I found debating philosophy, it was just, for me, phenomenal. Great professors and other students. And that sort of helped me grow as a person because I felt like I had a lot of years of maturing that I needed to catch up for. So I did that. Started partying again a little bit, but still maintained marks, still...
no drugs?
Yeah, doing drugs. I started doing drugs again.
Was it because of school? Or was
no,
just
I wanted to be normal. I wanted, for me it was like, when
that
you sober up that
normal.
little, right, when you sober up that young at 19 years old, you don't have a place socially, right? It was like other people who were sober are either much older than you or much younger, and they're not really having too much fun, right? And you get to university and everybody's drinking and everybody's smoking weed and it's all about the parties, and I was like, I don't know where I fit in with that. And so you start out, I started off slowly and I started off drinking again and hanging out, and I always loved house music, so I was like a bit of a raver when I was a kid, like a young teenager. And so then in my 20s I found myself in house parties, and everyone around me was like doing E and doing G, and it's there was the designer drugs, but I still was so focused on school, and I was, quite frankly, I was scared of cocaine. I was like, I know where that can take me, and I got to stay away. And I had a couple of people who were close to me that were very protective and made sure to keep that away from me. And then I relapsed at 24. I had a 3-month relapse that was literally took over in 3 months very quickly. And during that time, I got accepted into Osgoode Hall Law School. So I'm in the middle of a cocaine relapse. Really, my life was like unraveling in some ways. And then I get handed this gift horse.
The irony of life.
My addiction got so bad.
Nothing is a coincidence.
At all. My addiction got so bad that I actually called Osgoode and was like, can I defer for a year? I wanted to put off law school for a year so I could keep using. No, I wasn't ready to stop. And I knew I couldn't do both. And they said, no, you have to reapply again.
That's how it had
I
you
swear to God.
Oh,
and I said,
God.
I will never, there was something in me that knew I was never going to get this opportunity again. This was like a one-shot deal for me.
The poke is always going to be there.
You know what? And that is exactly the message that changed my life. I had a friend of mine say to me, you know where this life takes you. You've been there before. You're going down that path again. And if that's what you want to do it. But you just got handed a door to a whole different life. And you don't know where that life takes you. You know where this one, and it'll always be there for you. And I said, you're right. And so I accepted the invite to Osgoode. And this would have been, I had just turned 25. So it was like June, right before I was going into school. And in September, I started fresh. And I had to turn my whole life around. I quit everything. I quit the partying. I quit drinking. I quit smoking cigarettes, which I had been doing since I was like everything. I had to cut everybody off and literally like wipe the slate clean. And it's sober ever since. So I'm going to be 40 in June this year. So it's been 15 years.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And it was a whole new life for me. And it was in law school that I was like, my first year I was like, I cannot do this. I can't compete. This is not happening.
Because you got to understand that, people got to understand, like, from what you're used to, your background, your surrounding, and what you're getting introduced to in law school, these guys are not coming from the same.
No. They don't understand any of it. That's some of them, most of them, I would say, it's unfathomable what actually exists out there for people. In care, on the streets. What club life was like any of it. And but it was in law school that I realized that perspective I'm going to use to my advantage. I'm going to help people that are coming up that have made the same choices that I did. I just didn't get caught. And so for me it was like, no, I understand not just the crimes and not just the players, but like the mindset. And that's something I'm going to use to my advantage. I'm not going to lose that. And it's something that I've really worked hard to maintain so that when I'm meeting people and I'm at the jail, like I'm fully aware that my own choices in life could have landed me in that same situation. And so I want to understand my clients.
The transition from leaving the streets and then relapsing, then making the choice of going to law school, and then dealing with that environment, allowed you to, because you're a Gemini, right?
Yeah.
So I know for a fact my son is a Gemini.
Yeah.
What bit is like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are, like, your life was almost designed because of who you are. Like, you really can't. Yes. Even with myself, like, some of the stuff I went through is like so unbelievable. It's like, I just can't write this. Can't write this. I just gotta experience it.
That's
and
it.
then based on my experience and share with other people. That's what I went through. So like going to law school and then learning from that side of the world, and then you teaching them what you experience it, must have gave you an advantage in the courtroom.
So I sort of packed up my history when I was in law school. When I got into law school, nobody knew nothing. I was like, scared of anyone knowing
somebody
the truth
would say,
about me.
Jordana, let's go hang out. You're like, no.
No, yeah, I had 2 or 3 people that I was friendly with. There was one girl that me and her would study together, and we'd hang out at lunches. Her mom was a judge. Her dad's like a very prominent criminal defense lawyer. She didn't grow up around any of this at all. And somehow, our personalities just clicked and we were okay. But it was, we talked about school and everything was sort of superficial. I never talked about like my upbringing and my background. And I put all that in a little box and I put it in a closet, a locked closet. It was like, I am keeping this to myself for now. But I knew that eventually, sort of my promise to myself was, I'm going to wait until I'm successful in my career, and then I'm going to bring that box out, and I'm going to do something with it.
Because
I wasn't sure what.
Knew it's important
I did.
to share that.
I did. And one of the things, I never thought that I could be successful in anything because I didn't see anyone else that had been through what I had been through and become successful. Nobody was talking about it. And that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It most certainly does. But people that have overcome, addictions in street life and go on to have meaningful careers, especially professionals, they don't want to share that because we're scared of how that's going to hurt our career.
Only rappers do that.
For sure. Because they can. And that's how they come up, right?
Yeah.
They get famous by having had that life and by sharing it.
Yeah.
And, other people who are going through that struggle relate to it.
Law school and be like, yo,
look what I just did, right? Like, you can't. And it's very close like that. And so I knew that, and there was a part of me that said, I'm going to put this away in order to be successful, because if I can't be successful, if I let my history prevent me from being successful, then I'm not an example of anything. I'm an example of how you can fail by having lived that life. And so I wanted to do the opposite, and so I packed it away for like 10 years.
There's a saying, you got to play fool to catch wise.
Right.
You know what I mean? So pretty much
I like that.
You got to play the role.
I like that. Yeah. That's sort of what I did. But I also had to navigate that system, and I had to make me viable in that system, right? And it required me to come up in that fashion. I needed to leave all the other hats and all the labels behind, and that's something that I talk about is how we only respect certain labels. I sort of ripped the criminal label off and put the lawyer label on and said, now I'm going to go and act and speak and behave like a lawyer and only like a lawyer in order to gain that level of respect. And I've done that, by nothing other than hard work and learning the law and putting in the fight. And I've always, played in a respectable manner within the courtroom. And I think that that's how I've earned the trust of, my colleagues and judges and certainly clients. It hasn't come because I've said to them, oh, I know what it's like. I'm not here to be your therapist. I'm not to defend you. I want to wear the lawyer hat to the fullest. And I know you have some thoughts on what that.
No, listen, my thing with lawyers is this. Because I understand, you're an agent of the court. And at the end of the day, knowing the severity of what's going on with these people's lives, there's nobody should be speaking for anybody when it comes to certain things like that. You want to jaywalk, you want to get a lawyer, go ahead. When it comes to your life, your freedom, there's a lot of guys who end up in the pen, and me including, we get convicted. I'm in the pen now, I'm in J unit. I'm like, yo, my lawyer sold me out. There not many guys, my lawyer didn't do this, my lawyer didn't do that. So that's why I kind of, when you said my reputation, you could ask the guys I represent, they know I go to bat. And it's beyond that for me. I just seen your drive and just your background. So I feel like you move different, and you stand for something different. But for me personally, no lawyer could ever speak for me, like, ever. Like, when it comes to my freedom, buddy, I'd take a bullet in the head for a lawyer to speak to me. That's how serious it is for me. No way, because I understand. There was times I was in the prisoner's box, and things were happening. I told you how ridiculous my case was.
Right.
And it was like a charade,
right.
Which is, it is. It's like, what is this? And this is my life.
And you're fortunate enough that, the Court of Appeal agreed with you and sent the case back.
Right, 7.5 years later, after my mom became homeless and all this stuff. So it was like, fortunate, yes.
But there's guys in there that don't ever have that opportunity. They don't have their appeal heard.
For sure. But let me first tell you, some people are better off locked up. There's guys that came out of jail and yet end up getting killed. And I'm like, you know what, maybe you'd have been better off in jail. So, who knows, So, because...
And hopefully that's the piece that we get to change, right? Is helping people make that transition. I mean, that's part of, reintegration. It has to be about making a positive transition and learning how to, make the changes that you want in your life. Otherwise, you go back to a life where that's one of the consequences, right? I say that sometimes. It's an occupational hazard. And it's scary, but that's the truth.
It's sad, but I'm not playing that game because I really thought at one point the systems... you punish the bad people and whatnot, but it's not like that. Everybody's getting punished, no matter, it doesn't discriminate particularly, depending who you are sometimes, but the way the system is structured, there's no rhyme and reason, there's no logic, there's no I did this because of this, you know what I mean? It's like, you did this and that's it.
Yeah.
That's it, It's not helping nobody, but, so, how long did it take you to graduate law school? 5 years?
3 years.
3 years?
3 years in law school, and then 10 months of articling, and then you had to write bar admissions course, so it was basically a 1-year program with the Law Society. So at the end of the 4 years, you become a lawyer.
So what did you do after that?
So I started off in civil litigation. I didn't start in criminal. My family and my close friends reminded me that I had spent most of my life at that point as a criminal, and I should get away from that life. That's what I was told. Get away from that life.
They don't want you to be enticed.
No, they did not. They wanted me to.
What did they think? You just going to become a criminal
again? They
were
scared. I don't know. I mean, a lot of them were scared. They had seen me slip and fall, so I guess they just wanted me to stay away. Quite frankly, I took their advice. I don't regret taking their advice, but for different reasons, right? So I went into civil, and that's when I learned how to really wear the title of a lawyer, right? I was dealing with corporate and commercial clients, real estate issues, estates issues, very business orientated. And so you have to behave a different way. You hold yourself a different way. You speak a different way. And I was fortunate enough to have great mentors around me at the firm that I was at. It was a small firm, 6 lawyers. And so I learned how to handle files and speak to other lawyers and just go to court and be a lawyer. And then I got bored, and I was like, I can't do this. My passion was always in criminal law.
Based on your background, for sure.
And then I wanted to help people that, because I was still reading criminal cases when they would come out. We would get, there's different publications that lawyers have access to.
And you want a piece
and
of the action.
I was reading about all these criminal cases.
And,
we spoke earlier on about how when I was a little kid, my dad would pick me up and drop me off with my cousins. Well, one of those cousins that I was growing up with is a prominent lawyer in Toronto, and we disconnected for 20 years, right? So when my dad stopped picking me up, I stopped seeing her because she was, on my dad's side. When I was in law school, we reconnected, and she had also gone to law school, and she was, years ahead of me, and we stayed in touch. And so one day we were sitting, and I was telling her about a case I was working on, and she looked at me, she's like, "I am so bored listening to you. I don't know how the fuck you're doing this work." And I looked at her, I was like, "What?" And she's like, "This isn't you. It's not you. You're trying to be something you're not. Your interests are not in the right place right now." And she was right. She was 100% right. So she helped me get my foot in the door in a criminal firm. And I started off, I spent 5 years at a firm. I was always, entrepreneur in spirit. And so I developed my own practice within that firm. And after 5 years, I just picked up my little practice and set up my own shop. And so now it's been 4 years that I'm a business owner and criminal defense lawyer.
Excellent.
So it's been pretty good.
So not
so
bad.
That's
not
the
bad. Not
trajectory.
bad for somebody who, mother had to kind of, You know, credit to your mother too. Like she wasn't egotistical to the point where she's like, no, well, I'm the only one that could fix you.
No.
She reached out and asked for help. And I think some mothers don't do the children a disservice.
Absolutely.
They aid and abet the bullshit.
Absolutely. And they also, you know, a lot of parents also enable people, especially, you know, those drug addicts, to stay in, you know, in this sort of comfort zone, right? And you can continue living here and come and go as you please, and it's such a disruption to the whole house. And I didn't have that either. It was like, if that's how you're going to behave, get out. And so that enabled me to hit a bottom that drove me to want to do better, right? If I had never hit that bottom, if I had never experienced such lows, I probably wouldn't have been able to pick myself up, because I know, like when I was in rehab at 19, I was the youngest one there, and a lot of the women that were in their 30s, you know, they were coasting. They had been drug addicts for a long time, but they never hit that rock bottom, and so they always knew there was sort of a comfort zone that they could fall back on, and I didn't have that comfort zone.
I feel that, because I feel like same thing. Like I grew up not really committing crimes, but I know guys who've been committing crimes their whole life, right? But for me, like I hit rock bottom,
right?
But for them, you know, they never got a life sentence.
Right.
They got 3 years.
Right.
So they always just like whatever.
Yeah, they're doing life in installments.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
That's what they're doing. That's a life sentence
I
in
got
installments.
the L, boom,
That's
right
it.
in my face. So I was like,
That's it.
You know what I mean? So I had to deal with it. So I fully understand what you mean by that. You know, you're very career driven, and I remember I think somebody asked you about children, about having a family.
Yeah.
And you said that's not something you want.
Right. It's not something that I ever really wanted. You know, when I was a little girl and the little girls around me were like, oh, I want to marry and have kids. And
so it has nothing to do with the lack of family structure that you didn't have?
It might. You know, we
talked
talked
about
about
that might be part
yeah,
of it.
It could be. I never really grew up around
And
babies and little kids because I didn't have kids around me. I grew up as an only child, right? So
It's the
I
unknown
have
for
little
you.
kids,
It's the
right?
unknown.
So I never really grew up wanting kids. When I see babies, I'm not like, oh, can I hold your baby? Like that's not me. I'm like that with puppies.
You're
I
not
see
like your
puppies.
mother. You're not
no,
like your
I'm
mother.
not. I see little puppies. I'm like, oh my god, I want to play with your puppy. But like, I've never felt like that. I've never had that maternal instinct where it's like I want to.
But
I've
you
never had
do
it.
have it in a different sense in how you help the people.
For sure, but I do it not from a place of like necessarily wanting to be a mother figure. I want to help people help themselves.
Mm-hmm. But
right?
what I'm saying is that
for sure,
maybe you don't consciously realize it,
right.
but it's just something innate. As I feel like the feminine energy, the feminine principle. That's just a natural thing. Like we live on Mother Earth. Like it's called Mother Earth for a reason,
sure.
you know. So like the feminine energy, the feminine principles is very strong. So there's things that as a woman you just naturally do. Me as a man, like again, more science we learn. We know that men are degenerate versions of women. Like I can't have a child.
right?
You know, I can't breastfeed a child. You know what I mean? So, you know, but so we understand.
Oh, I agree. There's defined roles.
We understand the superiority. So, what I'm saying is that you don't necessarily need to have children, but as a woman, it's just natural for you to kind of look after, help. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, wicked women are running around the world trying to blow up stuff. Not too many. Not too many.
That's true.
So
that's true.
So it's just, you know, yeah. So I just think, you know, I think that might have something to do with it. Just because for me, after what I went through with my mother, my daughter, I was hella scared to have children and somebody else. And so I'm like, I had this shit blow up in my face. I don't want to go through it again.
Right.
You know what I mean? And even as early as I can remember, maybe 10, I swore to myself never to have children in this world because I knew from that time how messed I felt the world was so fucked up. And, you know, I got in my teenage years, I dated, I had a daughter, you know. So, but yeah, it's crazy, you know. So for me, it was a conversation I had with a friend of mine. He was like, "What are you waiting for?" Like, I'm scared, fam. Like straight up, I'm scared. I'm scared. I don't want to have to go through, you know, having children with somebody and then it blowing up in my face.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't want to go through it. You know, having my child not under my roof, that was not part of the plan. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, I never really had that. Oh, I want to have kids. I've never felt that internally, that it's something that was lacking in my life. I have poured myself into my career happily. I haven't been in a relationship in the sense of where we were at a point where we wanted to have kids. I'm in a relationship now, but there's no desire on either part of us to have kids. We're both very career driven, and that's the focus. And I've said, in one sense, it's like selfish the way that I live, and in other ways it's selfless because it's just something that I know that I wouldn't be able to give the attention to that it absolutely deserves. And I like to be able to travel. I like to do things last minute. I don't have those sort of responsibilities at home that I have to concern myself with other than my career, and I take that with me.
You help the community in other ways.
That's it.
You help the community in other ways. So you're into hip hop. How did you get into hip hop?
So I used to play a lot of sports when I was young. Mm-hmm. Like when I was growing up, me and my next door neighbor were best friends, and it was a guy, and we used to play basketball together. We played baseball together. And I was a tomboy, yeah. And so I was very athletic. I was always playing into sports.
But you know what? Where did you say, man?
Yeah.
I think it was common. A lot of them,
it
was common for because I don't know if there's even with my daughter, I'm like, yo, there are girls. Pregnant teenage girls in your school? She's like, oh, no, not really. It's very rare. I'm like, that was a norm.
That was norm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's crazy. So, things are so
things
different.
Have changed.
Yeah.
Things have really changed.
Different.
And I feel old saying that.
So
so I grew up playing sports, and I loved basketball. And when I was like 8 or 9, and both my parents were working, I was that latchkey kid that would come home on my own. And I would stop on the way home at the basketball courts and just play. And there was guys there that was always playing music. It was always hip hop, and I got handed I'm really gonna date myself here, and I still have it. I had a cassette tape of Eazy-E's "Easy Does It," and I fell in love. I love the sound of the music. I love the anger of NWA, Straight Outta Compton, and it was a world that I had never experienced before. I grew up in a working class neighborhood. And there was no racial divide, right? My good friend was a black girl named Natalie. One of my other good friends was an Indian girl named Rishi. My first crush was a guy from Trinidad named Dennis. Like, I can still picture him.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't, and my parents didn't care. There was no racism. And so to hear how racist the police were treating people through hip hop music was something that surprised me and moved me. And I didn't really understand it from an experiential point of view. And then as I went through life, obviously, I got to see how that plays out. But there was lessons that I was learning through hip-hop music, and I also just loved the music. And there was a lot of anger and aggression to it. And I think, I was growing up as an angry person, and for me, I connected with that emotional side, too. So, I always loved hip-hop. And then, as I went through the ages, it was Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, and
is there a particular artist or verse that got you open? Like for me, there's I told you about Jeru, who's one of the guys that I interviewed for my podcast.
Right.
Jeru the Damager. He's one of the first artists that got me open. And Nas is another artist.
I just got tickets to Nas's concert in September.
Lauryn Hill?
Yeah.
I mean,
Mary J. Blige.
I went to Lauryn Hill one.
Yeah, last year.
My empress is still talking to me about it. I'm like, no man, I want to stand. Standing for so long, I don't know, might go, but yeah. So for me, it was Jeru and Nas. So what do you? Is there a hip hop verse that got you open? Was what did this person just say, or is there artists that?
I have that all the time. You know what? I feel that way a lot right now. T.I. has some phenomenal songs where you listen and the message that he's trying to send to you is unbelievable, and I think he's very understated. And I love his work. Obviously, Kendrick Lamar is just phenomenal. His skills, it's just bar none. There was a time in my life where the anger and aggression coming out of Eminem was something that I really connected with. And so I think that it's
I don't know if you ever heard
of course
Onyx.
I remember Onyx. Of course.
That's mine.
Yeah, fast and angry.
I used to go to sleep to that.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, when I was coming out of rehab, it was Eminem, and it was like that anger and
I
that
had
passion.
Eminem too, hard
right?
too.
Like
Eminem.
he was amazing. We talked earlier on about J. Cole. I'm a big fan for sure. Right now, the new Meek Mill Championships is a phenomenal album.
I like it.
He's really poured himself into that, and he's speaking some crazy truth bombs all throughout that
Any
album.
local artists you listen to?
I'm very good friends.
But does that get political?
Truly adore. No, I don't care how political it is. Drew James is one of my very, very good friends.
Drew James, you ever heard of him?
Drew James, and he is.
I'll look him up.
He's phenomenal, and he's just an amazing human being.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We met 2 or 3 years ago. I was sitting in a tattoo artist chair, getting my elbow tattooed, and he walked in and he was like, "You're not even flinching." And I was like, "No," and he's like, "I need to talk to you." And he sat down,
right
and he kept me company the
away.
whole time, and we've just been friends ever since. So I've got nothing but support for him. But there's a lot of phenomenal artists out there right now.
So there's no particular artist that got you open to hip hop or verse that sticks out in your mind.
Like I said, for me it was Easy Does It by Eazy-E. That whole album. I was moved when he died. I was 16 years old, and I'll never forget that announcement in high school, and it shook me, for sure. But yeah, it was Eazy-E and NWA's Straight Outta Compton were the first 2 hip-hop albums I had, and I've been listening ever since.
You are a defense lawyer solely.
Yes.
Like you don't plan on becoming a prosecutor or
No.
And I presume that has to do with the fact, just your life story and what you see the system to be. Like you're not trying to help in that aspect.
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
So I think you guys
Never
get
have,
better
never
understanding
will.
why she's sitting here. She's not on that side.
No.
And and also I think you mentioned you don't do pedophiles or skin beef, sexual stuff. Like,
I don't do any. I don't represent people right now charged with sexual assault, child pornography.
Is that your own principal thing that you're like, no, I just can't?
Yeah, there's no winners in those cases at all, because either my client is factually innocent and being dragged through a horrible, horrible situation that I can't help stop the process, right? If somebody's wrongfully accused of sexual assault, like what they have to go through emotionally and physically and financially, because it's a lot of work to defend these, they still got to pay me, is horrific for the wrongfully accused person. And if you're not wrongfully accused and something you actually did, I don't want you to have my time and my energy depending on that.
Listen.
And so for me, I made a choice years ago what I wanted to focus my energy and attention on, because my clients get it 100%. Homicides, firearms, and drugs. And that's really primarily what I do. It's not necessarily just political. I also don't do impaired driving cases anymore. Mm-hmm. Not because I have anything against someone charged with impaired driving, but it's a very technical area of the law. And if you don't give it your 100%, you miss some of the defenses because they're technical, and I'm bored by it. So there's a good reason why I've chosen what I do, but I understand generally, the life and the circumstances of people who are charged with firearms, drugs, and homicide-related offenses. So that's what I focus my energy on.
Well, listen, if you're a single person in the world right now, I feel for you, because I don't know how I would survive as a single person.
Only as a man.
Yeah, because I don't know.
Single man. Women right now,
yeah, women are good.
They can do whatever they want, whenever they want. They can say whatever they want. There's no accountability.
It's crazy.
And I'm prepared to say that because I think it's a very scary time for a man right now.
Well, that's what the point I'm trying to make is that, like, I remember growing up. I'm pretty sure there's times where I was gonna get it, but because I made sure I'm not aggressive. No, I don't want no accusations.
Right.
Purposely. So I'm pretty sure there's times I passed it off not knowing. You know what I mean? So just the way everybody's so hypersensitive with cameras, hey, hi. Like,
right.
I can't make eye contact with you. Like, I don't want to get accused of anything. Like, it's crazy now.
See, that's on one side of the pendulum, but then we're living in a world where, media music, movies, art, everything is so hypersexualized. So you've got hypersexuality on one side,
Booty
super sensitive, right? Women are walking around in next to nothing, twerking with their little home video camera, putting that all over Snapchat and Instagram.
But
don't look at me. Don't look at me. Right. Like, I don't know what a man is supposed to do.
You're thirsty.
Right.
Why you being thirsty?
Right. It's a scary world, right? And then when a man acts in accordance with what he thinks he's supposed to do, the police are showing up at his door.
It's confusing for these men right now.
It is.
I got 2 boys. I don't know what it's going to be like. I hope that's part of the reason why I'm trying to be transparent as best as I can, because I know I got 2 boys coming up, and trying to make sure things are a lot better for them by the time they get to a certain age. But like you said, I remember in one interview you were saying like some of your cousins, your male cousins, your teenage cousin, you're like, yo, you're ready to, if you're gonna have sex with a girl, you better get consent and all this shit, like all of the above.
Honestly, consent and sobriety, because even if you think she consents, if she's not sober enough to consent, then she doesn't consent. What?
Because consent is not
What
assumed.
are you supposed to do? And, God forbid, he's not 100% sober. How are you supposed to analyze?
No, there's a man I know right now that's in court for these type of things right now. You know what I mean? And he knows what could happen if that's true.
Right.
You know what I mean? Those accusations. So it's like, but it's this. He was drunk. She was drunk. It's like, how do you figure this out?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Get it in writing. Get the consent part of it. Tell me that you're sober and you consent to what's about to happen, and let's talk about what's about to happen. Like, I don't know how else a man properly protects themselves anymore. And that brings me to my next point, where we talk about the whole matriarchy versus patriarchy, where it's like, I remember they did like some 1 million women march like a couple of years ago. All these Hollywood actresses came out for it, and then like a few months after, some woman got killed somewhere and nobody's saying nothing. It's like, I take it upon myself to try to find the leadership within women. Like, I know as a man I could do me, but I can't do women because I don't have the parts, right? So I'm looking for that. I'm always looking for it. This is part of the reason why you're here. Right. Because I'm always looking for that, because I know the importance of having feminine energy within government. How it's so ass backwards not having them in there right now. Absolutely. And that's why we're where we're at. We're at like 5% of the men in the world ruling, making calls and so on and so forth. And again, we live on Mother Earth. So it's not, again, based on what we know, we're a degenerate version of women. So how is it possible we govern you guys when, again, naturally, you care? So even with some of the women that have gone astray, I understand. But it's like, what comes first? What's going to happen first? Are we going to have to get men to change? Or are some of these women just going to be like, nah, okay, we're not going to be playing this game? Because when you think about it, some of the men, the evil men of this world, they have women around them. How are those women allowing some of these men to do what they're doing? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You would not put yourself in a position where there's a man out there, you're part of a bunch of men and you're the only woman and they're doing atrocities all over the world. You wouldn't do that, right? So how do I'm not saying we have to get the pendulum changing less dramatically, right? I feel like a lot of these women's rights movements are forcing the pendulum to shift way too far in the other direction, and the pushback for men is going to be negative in the long run, right? Because you can only push so far before you're going to have negative consequences. And we really needed to do a better job of meeting in the middle and recognizing, it's not about female rights, it's not about men's rights, it's about human rights, right? Let's all come together. Same thing with there has to be black better, people with civil rights. 100%. It has to be, everyone has to be treating each other equally. And I know that there's a push for women's equality in the sense of fair pay. Obviously, I agree with that. But then you have to do the same work. And if you're doing the same work and there's that unequal pay, then of course you've got to make that complaint, but you have to put that work in. And I just think that there's a bit of a disconnect there.
And it's some of the bandwagon thing. It's like, I get it, you know, the women have been oppressed. I get it. I know that. I know that. It's like when I see my own mother, I seen other women go, I get it. But there was also women that's aiding and abetting some of this man. So what's gonna happen? Somebody's gotta stop. Somebody's gotta start somewhere. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like women couldn't work, and then we wanted the right to work, and then we went to work, and then realized, oh wait, if we're gonna be, you know, career women, it's gonna interfere with our ability to be good moms. There's only 24 hours in a day, right? Like, there's only so much you can do. And
so sacrifices have been made.
You have to make sacrifices somewhere, right? Either you're going to make the sacrifices at home or you're going to make them in your career, but I can't be a lawyer and an astronaut. I have to make choices.
Well,
and,
this is why I kind of respect the fact that you're like, you know what, the family thing is not for me.
Right.
But this is what I'll do.
This is it, you know, and I want to make change in different ways and help people in different ways. And that was part of the plan. And so I think, you know, I know a lot of female lawyers are struggling to be like amazing sole practitioners and also be mothers. Well, of course, because there's only so much time in the day that you can spend. You can't expect to be able to do both. Absolutely. And so is having a child. So if you can't afford to have that nanny because you haven't positioned yourself in your career to be able to do that, you can't be surprised when your career suffers on account of having a baby. But if that's what you want to do, right.
And then your home suffers.
Absolutely. Something's got to suffer. There's only so much that we can do. And so at some point you have to make those choices.
Excellent. This is true. Is there, like, is there negative feedback from peace officers because of who you are and how you carry yourself? Because you're not the typical lawyer who just does the thing. Because before that, I found most lawyers just go do the thing, and they're usually just quiet. You don't really hear of them unless they're like politically driven or something. But for the most part, they're not doing what you're doing in the community. You know what I mean?
You know what? There has not been any pushback from what I do in the community. There have been plenty of police officers who have left the courtroom after my cross-examination and called me all sorts of names that I'm very proud of.
I could imagine.
And I take pride in that. But, one of the things that I'm doing outside of my career per se is I work with an organization, as you know, called Keep Six. Mm-hmm. And we're starting a project right now that requires some participation or from the police force. And so I've reached out to a couple of officers with guns and gangs in Toronto as well as in Peel.
There's a peace officer named Swift. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No.
I'll send you his link. He's pretty active on social media. He might be a person you should link up with, because I was looking to sit down with him too.
And it's trying to help give young people who are either involved or at risk of being involved in gang life another viable option for employment. And so I presented this, to the Toronto Guns and Gangs to listen, like, this is something that we're working on. What do you think? Can we have your support in this? And they thought it was a phenomenal idea. Mm-hmm. And the head of Guns and Gangs in Toronto said, listen, I would love, to help you out as you guys get the foundation set and the logistics set. Let me know, keep me apprised. So, at the end of the day, I think most police want to see the streets safer, and if we can find a way to do that doesn't send people to jail en masse, it's a win-win, right? Because then we get safer communities and we get people not incarcerated for the rest of their life.
So when I asked that question, it's not based on just, because I know majority, because from being in the system, correction officers, peace officers, most of them are good people. They're like most of them. But then you have some shit disturbers.
You always got assholes in the group.
You know what I mean?
You can't.
So, but the thing, my issue is this. For the amount of shit disturbers that there are and the amount that they're not, the shit disturbers get a lot of print, right? And then on top of that, the ones who are not just going to work, like, when is a good cop going to speak up and say, you know what? And say, hey, buddy. Because that's a gang culture too.
100%. But it is a gang culture.
Yeah.
And it's
So
and it's a boys' club. There's been a lot of women police officers who have come forward about situations of harassment.
Yep.
And they're now trying to break through to make serious change within that community.
As they should.
Absolutely, 100%.
And people like yourself, make sure they're good. They support them, and whatever they need, because I firmly understand that when it comes to the feminine principle, it needs to be involved in government. I remember a couple of years ago, I was doing a walk there's a girl who runs an organization called FEET, and she does this walk. She walks from Toronto to Ottawa to raise money for a bus. The bus takes families to the
Oh, yes.
So when we're doing the walk, she starts up in the city. So I was talking to one of her friends who was supposed to become, she was going to become a peace officer. Okay. And she basically confided in me and she said she's scared because of what you speak of.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Just having to deal with that.
Yeah.
How am I going to change? How am I going to enact change when I got these guys here?
Right. Who don't want to change.
Intimidating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, there is a lot of bad. There's been a lot of, cowboy groups that have gone into communities and have caused a lot of the distrust and mistrust amongst those communities. And in doing so, they've done a disservice not just to the community, but society at large, right? Because, it's something that I speak about. If you're going to treat someone like a criminal, they're just going to act like a criminal, right? So you've got a generation now who just doesn't care about society at large because the law has treated them like shit as they've come up. And so, we all play a part in this system, police included, and I think that if we all work together to try to enforce change for people, then we can all meet the same goals, which is really having a safer community with people being more productive with themselves.
Okay, true. How important do you think it is to have a curriculum in school based on law?
I think it would be beneficial for people to understand their rights. I think it would be beneficial for people to understand how to deal with
for example,
law.
what I mean, the basic stuff. This stuff that people don't know.
Right.
The basic stuff, I feel like should be taught in elementary
So
school.
should finance.
Yeah.
People don't know how to manage their money.
But that's by design.
Right.
It
is 100%. Keep people ignorant about the things that are most important to them.
All this stuff,
Law,
Jack and Beanstalk and all this nonsense. I don't care. I want to know facts.
I don't care about.
And the sooner you teach children the facts, the better they could make decisions according to the facts that's been presented to them.
Like, when's the last time you used geometry?
What?
But it's important to know how to manage your credit, right? So what are we teaching people?
Exactly.
We're counting on parents to teach them financial literacy, but there's a large group of people who don't have families who are financially literate, especially in today's very confusing banking world. I brought in a woman who specializes in bankruptcy insolvency into a youth center that I was working at, helping to teach kids who are just transitioning out of homelessness how to get themselves out of debt or how to avoid debt. And most people don't even realize that, when you run up your credit card, even if you pay off a little bit, you're still being charged on the total amount originally. And they didn't realize what it takes to actually get themselves out of credit card debt. And if you don't know that, then it's so easy to use that little card and put yourself into a hole you can't dig out of.
It's a trap.
I didn't know it. Of course not.
It's a trap, and they know it. They know it, But I think it's important. I firmly believe it. With my children, they're gonna know certain things. They're not gonna be intimidated. I think we grew up in being intimidated by the peace officers and just because we just didn't know what to expect, and then the media in Hollywood, Mississippi Burning, all this Boys in the Hood, the cops being, you know what I mean? So
absolutely.
It's like we all got set up to play this role.
But that's only a reality in some communities.
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up in Thornhill, Richmond, that wasn't my reality. When I started, going downtown, when I was in my first year of high school and seeing what life was like in Regent Park, it's a whole different world. And that's the problem, is when you have certain communities that have that distrust of police because of their experience, then we're setting them up for the failure.
And I think, I know that we have peace officers in the neighborhood that have no connection to the neighborhood.
Right. And don't understand.
Not supposed to happen. That can't not happen. There's no way you expect to have good results from that. There's no way. No way. Makes no sense, you know.
Well, and they come from a place of not understanding, right? They don't understand why people are behaving the way they are. They don't understand what it takes to have a conversation
it's like the
with
people you
someone
went to
safely.
law school with,
Right.
policing the
Right.
neighborhoods that they didn't grow up in.
Absolutely.
It's like, you know what's gonna happen.
Right.
And even if you reverse the role, if the guys that grew up in the inner city were to go police the way they conducted themselves, it might be something different for them. Like, you know, so I think it's all about getting a better understanding. I think community policing needs to be. We need the cops on the beat, like SWAT the beat, like, you know, they used to what?
Yeah.
Come out your car.
Yeah.
You don't just want to see in your cruiser. Come on.
And come talk to people.
Come on.
In a way that doesn't intimidate and scare them. And why don't you not start off with patting them down? Because that's probably not going to be the start of a positive conversation, right? Like,
no. I mean, you don't go up to people and just pat them down and just say, hey,
no, hey, how's it going? I'm going to grab you right now and see what's going on in your boxer shorts. Like, that's not the introduction to a positive conversation. And, you know, it doesn't have to happen that way.
No. So, yeah, I feel like even it's so absurd to me that police officer could go to, how long is police academy? The training?
Oh, I think it's like 9 or 10 months or something, a year, something like
Less
that.
than a year, and then you as a lawyer got to do 3. But yet, look at the position you play as a lawyer and what you have to learn, and then look at the position they play. You would think that they need to be more or well informed on some level, not just come off the street and get hired and then boom, you're out there.
I think it's about well informed, and you know, I find that with a lot of police officers, there's this fear factor, right? They're scared of people who are suffering from mental health issues. They're scared of people who are drug addicts. You know, that's why they walk up and the first thing they want to do is pat you down and to make sure they're not going to get shot. Well, someone walking around with a gun isn't just looking to run up and start shooting police officers. It happens, but that's not really what they're doing. If they're just standing on a street corner, maybe they're selling drugs, maybe they're not.
They're more likely to leave.
Absolutely.
Because of your presence.
They're not there to cause trouble with you. They're not about to start flashing their gun because they don't want you to see it. So if you're just really wanting to have a conversation and make sure they're safe and talk about the people around them, you know, that pat down ends all communication.
And you know what too? Imagine a cop goes up to some child that he already knew or he had a relationship because he's not doing pat downs.
Right.
And maybe something happens and the cop doesn't even know and sees the child. Doesn't even know the child has a gun on him. Goes to talk to him like he regularly does. And based on that conversation, the child says, you know what? I'm going to go put his gun down.
Right.
That shit just switched. The whole, instead of, you don't know what's going on. Oh, you have a gun on you, you're going to jail. But you never solved the problem that he was going through. You don't know what's going through. You know what I mean? And then the conversation wasn't even helping him.
I see it in the opposite context. You know, I have clients that they get caught, you know, in their late teens, early 20s with a gun, and they tell me about how when they were, you know, 12 and 13 and 14, they were walking home from school, walking home from a job. Some of them were walking home from like basketball courts or community centers, and they would be stopped and searched and frisked, and they were treated like they were, you know, standing on a corner selling drugs when they really weren't. They were just trying to like come from their tutors or come from their community center. And it gets to the point where they're like 16 or 17, and they're like, why am I going to bother trying to do things the right way if you're just going to treat me like I'm a drug dealer anyways, and I want to be driving the nice cars, and I want to be wearing flashy clothing, so I might as well just start selling drugs because that's all you treat me like I am.
Mm-hmm. And then the role models around the ways that had those things were
Of course.
usually...
Drug dealers.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And so instead of the police walking up and being like, hey, you know what? Good job, man. I'm really glad to see that you're coming from the community center and encouraging people that are doing right, you're pushing them to do wrong.
First of all, as a peace officer, you're an example.
Right.
Like, people should aspire to be like you because of how you conduct yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean? The same thing with, you know, when you talk about, you know, your religious leaders and so on and so forth. People are supposed to aspire to, can't be, you know, less than that, you know, based on that. That's why even when you say we can't judge people based on the title, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I want to get into. So what is who judges the judge? What's that title? What is that all about?
So I've been asked that a lot lately, whether or not it's like a slight at judges, and it's really not.
No.
It's what it's based on is, you know, judges supposedly sit at the very top of the justice system hierarchy. And who judges the judge is really about calling into question the way that we show respect to the various participants. You know, the reality is a lot of people that make their living in the justice system, so lawyers like me, prosecutors, obviously judges, court reporters.
My wife counted. She said 16 people was in the courtroom.
Right, but those people who spend their lives as making this a career, a lot of our identity is wrapped up into that title and who we are. And, you know, it's very rare to sit down and have an open, in-depth conversation like this about who you are as a person, right? And it's different from who you are as your title. And the problem with the justice system is that we automatically show respect to the judge and we automatically show disrespect to the criminal at the bottom, except without that criminal there would be no judge because we wouldn't need it. And the whole system crumbles. But for that group of people, that large group of people that are on the bottom of the hierarchy. And the reality is a lot of those people have the qualities and the traits and the personality that we in society have respect for. But nobody looks at that because we're so busy judging them right off the bat by the title that they hold. And so that's the accused or the criminal in the system. But what you have underneath all that is someone who's probably really smart or really loyal or really hardworking or really coming from an unfortunate set of circumstances that put them in that position in life. But for a different set of circumstances, they will be in a different position. And if we could give them the opportunity to let that personality and those personality traits come through, they wouldn't have that label, right? And so it's really about turning the system upside down to say, let's start looking at the individual. And by doing so, if we can help get some people, you know, on their feet and out of the system, not only does the system benefit, not only does that individual benefit along with his family, but society at large, right? Everyone's concerned about these public shootings, and everybody's being, you know, shot at, and we've got people shooting up malls, and parks, and, you know, parades.
You name it.
Everything. And that's because people don't care. The person firing the gun doesn't care if they hit a bystander anymore. They don't even think about it. They're like, oh, that's the guy that, you know, disrespected me last year. And now I'm just going to fire off shots and hopefully I hit him without thinking about the kids in the way.
Not even disrespect, because hurt people. Somebody got traumatized, so now he's scared, and he sees the person that traumatized him. Right. What do you expect him to do?
Right, which is what happened at the Eden Center. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't do something, society at large is just going to become more dangerous because people are going to continue not caring about all of the other people in the way.
Hurt people.
Absolutely.
That's why I stay home.
But that's why we need to do a better job of saying, like, listen, this is someone who is hurt or broken or mentally ill or suffering from a drug addiction. Let's find a way to get them help so that they can now help themselves, help their families, and the community is that much safer because they're not shooting wildly at people in a cafeteria. True. And so the idea is really to open our eyes to the fact that we can't just judge people by their character. We need to take a minute and find out who they are as people.
I'm glad you brought up mental health. What percentage of our community, do you think suffers from PTSD?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't have the stats on it.
No, but I'm just saying, do you think it's high?
I do think it's high. And
like how high?
I think that anybody who's been through the penitentiary system comes out with some form of PTSD
for sure.
that they need to address.
For sure.
And I don't think that people realize how traumatic it is for someone, especially young people in their formative years, early 20s, mm-hmm. that go through J-Unit, for example. You know, what they're seeing and experiencing.
My first experience in J-Unit was a riot.
Right.
My nose, I thought I was going to die. And I have a minor case. My nose is running, and the only way I could breathe was I had this little window. Nose is running, like, trust me. Just stay home, man. Just stay home and be good. Trust me. Trust me, dog. Stay home and be good. Get yourself a family and just stay home, fam. Be good.
But I think a lot of people are coming out. I know, you know, I've had people tell me that they have to take 2 or 3 weeks just to adjust to the natural light, to adjust to the sounds of society.
Just even energy.
Absolutely.
Get tired.
You know, I had a client in my office the other day, and he did, I think, a 2-year sentence. And he was telling me, before me, just for the record, mm-hmm. before he met me, And he told me that the biggest adjustment was not being called inmate and actually recognizing that he had his own identity tied to his own name. And I never really thought about that. You know, I hear it when I go to the jail to visit my clients.
You know what an FPS number is?
An FPS? No.
That's like the
federal number?
Yeah. So even that, like,
right.
I remember that.
Right.
Because you have to know that.
But just to be called inmate, like, you're not called entry anymore. It's inmate, do this, inmate, go here, inmate, it's time for breakfast. And, you know, I hear it when I go to jails, and, you know, like, think about how disconnected you are from your own identity, even including your own name.
But you know what, though? As an inmate, you could demand that respect still. Because I don't play that. Like, if I feel like you need to address me by my name, I'm going to tell you that. Right. So please. And then moving forward, chances are that person's going to address you if they don't want a problem. You know what I mean? So I think you just need, each individual just need to, because my experience is so vastly different. Like,
How old were you when you were doing that, though? When you were demanding that level of respect?
I was in my mid-20s.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, I never fought once in jail. And I went through jail unit, all that stuff. Never fought once in jail. So my experience was very unique.
It is unique.
Very.
Because I've got clients that fight regularly. They stab people regularly.
I have homies.
They get stabbed
you can't
regularly.
get it right. I'm like, yo,
they
fam,
don't even,
chill.
No,
can't
they
be
don't
time
even.
you can't chill. Just chill, fam. You in jail.
No.
I don't get it. Even the riot did. We smashed up our own thing.
Yep.
And then after the riot, we're like, can you guys fix the thing for us?
Right.
Oh,
it's true.
Crazy.
It's true.
Crazy.
It's true. But then you come out and you're expected to function in normal society where we don't break our own things and you don't punch someone in the face.
No, actually, you guys do riot out here. You guys do riot out here. Look in France. You got the yellow jackets. So yeah, it's still the same nonsense. People, you know, but it's just more extreme because it's, you know, such a concentrated community.
Absolutely.
Present.
So no, I do think a lot of people are coming out with what we would call at least some form of PTSD.
But what I wasn't even thinking about inmates. I'm just talking about in general as a community. Because I feel like as a community,
don't know. When we start throwing that label around to everyone, then everyone feels victimized. That's my problem with the labels. Is that, you know, when you put someone in a position of victimization,
for example,
they don't want to fix themselves.
For
They
example,
think, oh, it's just this.
Rest in peace, Nipsey Hussle.
Yes.
Did you see the video
Which one?
of how he got killed?
No, I didn't watch the video.
A lot of people saw that. That's traumatized. You know what I mean?
I struggle with that being what traumatized you. I mean, you can certainly be, you know, impacted by it. I think a lot of people around the world were impacted by his death, and rightly so. He was a phenomenal human being and a huge loss. But to say that just seeing that video was traumatizing, I have a hard time with that. I mean,
in a sense, there's a lot of content on the internet that is desensitizing people.
Oh yeah, there's live death videos right now.
That's what I'm saying. So
you can watch someone get skinned alive on the internet.
We're getting exposed and experiencing stuff that we're not even thinking.
But that's been around for a long time. I remember when the internet first came out, there was live death videos and pictures.
So I was locked up. By the time the internet thing happened, I was locked up.
I think people have been exposed to that for a long time, and I think that when you compare someone who goes on the internet to watch a live death video with someone who actually experiences the trauma of war, for example, you know, I have a hard time having the same label on the trauma that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm going to, maybe not trauma. Okay, we're going to go from trauma to a guy named Michael Briere.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember him.
No.
Holly Jones. You remember Holly Jones?
Yeah, of course.
That's the guy that killed her.
Okay.
He was watching child porn when he went to go look for her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So you see, like,
there's a lot of that too.
Based off what he's seeing,
right?
He went. So you know what I mean? It's still the same thing. Like, you gotta be careful what you're taking in. You know.
I think it's desensitized for sure.
As a community right now, there's no filter.
Right.
Is that true? Is that fair to say? There's no filter right now.
No. There's it's all available online.
Like, when I was a
child,
go on
the dark web,
I felt
you can see it all.
uncomfortable sitting beside my mom and watching two people kiss on TV.
Right.
That's not the case.
There's none of that anymore.
That's not the case. You know what I mean?
No, that I do.
So.
And I mean, we touched upon that in the over-sexualization of society in general, for sure. And now, you know, in a lot of the images that are out there, there's this combination of sex and violence that's so readily accessible. And that to me is scary. You know, we've got one movement that's having men apologize for giving a compliment, right? Like, oh, I'm not trying to offend you, but you're really pretty. Like, that's on the one side of the pendulum. And then you've got, live death videos being interrupted by porn sites.
Wiz Khalifa's baby mom. What's she doing?
Amber Rose.
What's she doing again? That one. She got her movement.
Right.
She's like, yo, it's cool to be a...
Right. So we've got everybody in a state of confusion, right? And no one knows how to behave, men and women alike, right? We're scrambling to try to find that place for everybody.
So this is
we're
what I'm saying.
asserting our rights, but demanding respect.
Some measure of...
There's a balance there.
Maybe it's not PTSD, but a lot of us suffer from some measure of mental...
Confusion, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh,
I'll give it that. But, I think that there's real traumatization out there. And then I think that there's other issues that need to be addressed.
So, I want to get into your bodybuilding. So, is that like a stress relief for you?
Yeah, I got into working out. I mean, like I said, I was always athletic and I was very active and I loved it. I think in high school, I took a course on bodybuilding in school. It was like part of my gym program, and I just loved how it felt. And then when I was coming up off the streets, I wanted to just be active, and I still wanted to
Do you think the working out helped with filling the void with the drugs?
Yeah, I think it was a different way to sort of escape, and it was a different way to control my body.
Different rush.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was something that I could see progress in, and I liked that, right? I liked that I could build myself up. And then the gym was just another outlet. It was a social outlet.
What about security reasons, too? Because you kind of grew up, you didn't really have your dad there. Was it for security, too?
I never really thought about that. I was never a fighter.
Were you into the gun thing? So is it like part of the security, like just growing up homeless?
No, I mean, at one point, I had a gun when I was homeless, and then, so I felt secure in that sense.
So that's what I'm saying. So from that times, you always knew, okay.
I always talked my way out of things.
I could trust this thing here to help me.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you've been in vulnerable positions.
Absolutely. I got into bodybuilding more as an escape, and then it was social, and it was healthy and social. So, instead of going out and partying and doing drugs, I could go to the gym and be healthy and do something that I knew was good for my body. And there was, a community there, right? There was a bodybuilding community.
He did a documentary on bodybuilding.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Make sure you send you the link.
And
you'll check it out.
It's funny. We talk about women being strong. It was me and my female best friend, but other than that, it was all guys around us. And when I went to the gym, even when I was in law school, it was me and the guys. It was always, I was training with guys that were on the men's national team, and so they were forcing me to be bigger and stronger and lift weight that I never would have, and the women, were all on the treadmill trying to get skinny. And I was like, no, I don't want that. I want to be able to squat 3 plates aside.
Yeah, honestly,
and so for me, it was
the more I talk to you, I realize if we would have ran into each other, you were one of those people I probably would have been getting caught up with when I was a child. You know what I mean? Maybe not the drugs, but definitely, because even growing up, I was never really judgmental. I grew up, just like you. I moved around a lot. You know what I mean? So I got introduced to different communities, even within Toronto.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Me too.
When I first moved to this side of the world, it was a Portuguese community. Then Italian. You just got to know. So most of my friends are very quote unquote black to white, whatever. So my teenage years, all my friends, I go to their houses, different experience.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was different experience in people's homes. So.
Me too. And I always managed to connect with solid guys that wanted to look out for me, even when I was homeless. It's funny. There was a group of black guys that controlled one of the corners and were selling crack, and they always said, if you ever need anything, use our name. And they were genuine. They just wanted to look out for me. And then there was another guy, I'll never forget, a Japanese guy that drove a Corvette, and he owned another corner. And he was like, if anyone ever tries to hurt you, you just mention me. And I always was fortunate enough to have guys that just, sort of took care of me in that sense and wanted to keep me safe. And it was the same thing. It was, there was a couple of guys that saw my potential to lift. They wanted me to compete. I got into law school. I said, no, I want to focus my energy, on school, but I loved how it felt, and so they continued to push me. No, I never competed. But it affects women, and I didn't want that. Women go through, it's not even the look. So you have to really deprive your body of food and water in order to look phenomenal on stage. Like, to be a champion bodybuilder,
the way the women
the sacrifice they have to make is unbelievable. And then what happens is, after the show, they go back to eating like normal human beings. And in fact, a lot of them binge on sugar and salt, and so they blow up and they gain like 20 pounds in the first month. What that does to them psychologically, I never wanted to do to myself. I saw it and I was like, no, that's not good for me, especially someone with an addictive personality. And I was like, I'm going to, go so hard into that. And it's going to take away. I did it recreationally. I enjoyed it. I went to the shows. I had fun. I supported, fellow bodybuilders. But for me, I didn't want to put myself through that psychologically.
That's well. While I was in prison, that's one thing I got into too, is working out. And I read somewhere that it helps release endorphins and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I was like, okay, that's what I need. You know what I mean? I need it because this is a depressing place to be. You know what I mean?
And it helps to have a little bit of size when you're in jail too.
Like I said, I didn't fight.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I have brains over bras. You know what I mean? So, But here we are at this point. We're going to get into the segment, Agree to Disagree. I sent you 3 things to pick from. And one of the things I talked about, because under color of law, there's this statuses, this labels that could, quote unquote black label that'll leave you exposed to being abused in the system. And I feel like if you're gonna subscribe to being black, at this point you might want to ask for your own court, because the way the system is designed to eat you up, not even give you a chance, unless you have Jordana Goldlist representing you. Oh, presenting, not representing. So that's my take. I think quote unquote black people better be asking for their own court if nothing's gonna change. At least change that.
So this is where we agree to disagree. Mm-hmm. I do not like the idea of implementing any form of segregation. I think that, society has come so far, it's not far enough, for sure. There are broken pieces of the system. There are ways in which we need to address racism in the system. So it's not to discount the fact that it exists, but to have a separate system, I think is going to cause problems in the long run. I think that what we need to do, I'm sure you're aware, there's native, exactly. So what happened was, a gentleman with the name of Gladue took his fight all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada, and now we have Gladue principles and we have Gladue reports. And what those is it's taking a look at the Aboriginal community's history with the system and their treatment, from colonization till today, and the way in which they have been so severely treated, scrutinized, their whole communities torn apart, and what that's done to the individual through generations, right? It's really a generational issue. And so now every court where a Native person comes before them has to take into account these differences. And so it happens that we have our bail courts that are separate.
The story sounds familiar, though.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying.
Now, last year, a Toronto judge at the Superior Court of Justice recognized the historical racism of black people. And it was a landmark decision because judges up to that point really hadn't been taking account of reports. Now, one judge out of Brampton did it on an importing case, and the Court of Appeal tore it apart. And this was, I don't know, I want to say 10, maybe 15 years ago. Fast forward another 10, 15 years, And it happened again last year, and this time a judge agreed that the historical mistreatment of black people is something
Quote,
that
unquote.
most certainly no, it wasn't. He actually took into account reports.
No. When people say black people around me, I like to use quote unquote.
Oh, okay.
Quote, unquote.
Took into account the historical and the mistreatment by police, and the way that race has played a part in policing and in their treatment within the justice system.
First of all.
So I agree with that approach. I think that we have to do a better job of recognizing those discrepancies. But it's so ingrained even in the way that we have sentencing regimes, right? Like if you compare the amount of time a person is sentenced and a person of any color is sentenced for, trafficking, crack, versus the amount of time that someone's sentenced for making and distributing child pornography, you would lose your mind. There is this fight to keep child pornographers out of jail for some reason, except those are the customers that are buying all the crack.
Okay. So this is the thing about the system that
Right.
I don't know if you're gonna agree, but this underlining. How should I put it? There's sexual deviants that run the system.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
And that's why even with child porn and how come there's not indictment on child porn or anything like people do, because they'll have an indictment on rap music and so on and so forth, but yeah, nobody's talking about the internet even itself. Like that's a problem, even though yes, it's there to help, but the freedom to just go and do whatever, because some human beings are just not strong enough for some things. I wouldn't delve to go see certain things, but like these, like I said, seeing Nipsey get murdered, like something I've got used to. I've seen it in real life. Like shit happens. But I don't know.
I don't like the idea of a separate black court per se, because I don't like the idea of segregation. But I absolutely think that we need to do a better job of looking at where the system has failed certain communities, and the, as you say, quote unquote, black community is one of those.
You already know I don't subscribe to being black, but I'm trying to tell you, if you're gonna play that black game with the system, you better know yourself, because they're not playing. You saw the documentary 13. They're not playing.
No.
They're not playing. You want to play games? Okay, go ahead. They're not playing.
Well, you're gonna lose because you don't have the money to win.
They're not playing.
And that's the unfortunate situation, is that the system isn't designed for people to win once you enter it. And that's what we need to do a better job of changing.
Now we got to the point. You already know. I published this book, 27th Letters. Based on letters I wrote my daughter while I was incarcerated. And now, with the podcast, with every guest, I'm asking them to put yourself, maybe not in my position, you don't have to be going to jail. It doesn't have to be your child. But that you want to leave a message to someone that you love, that you care about. You don't know when you're going to see them again. But you need to write down just a few words to let them know something. What would you write? Take your time. You don't have to read it to me. Just write it. What would you write? Date it and sign it. So yeah, that's it. That's how we end. Oh, check out her TED Talk, by the way. She has a TED Talk on YouTube. Check it out.
It's called Who Judges the Judge?
Who Judges the Judge? Are you a Southpaw too?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You're part of his family. Southpaw family. They say Southpaws use like a part of their brain that most their average person don't use.
It's true.
We're different.
For sure. Left hand shot. I like it. It's hard to block.
What?
It's hard to block.